Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are entering into the combat zone. I'm Joe, he's Nick. Don't make me laugh on the introduction, man. And this is the place where the enemy only has one of four things to say. Bail out, abandon ship, take cover, or we surrender.
It says them all.
It says them all. Yeah,
they say them all.
I knew all of that, Nick. Come on,
I know you did.
I know I did. And it's just that I was confused because I meant to say I'm Joe and he's Nick and you are entering into the combat zone. I had the whole thing rehearsed. But I know.
Show 63.
I was all ready to go. So listen, before we get into anything, Nick, today is June, what's the date today?
12th.
June 12th? Is it the
Yes.
12th already?
Wow,
good grief. So last weekend was the Trooping of the Colour in London, which is the summer celebration of Queen Elizabeth's birthday. It's not her actual birthday. She was born in April. But I have to kind of let the occasion pass without pointing out that she is now 93 years old and has been on the throne for 67 years. So, I wouldn't be a good monarchist if I didn't actually say something about that tonight. And that's all I have to say about that, Nick. We have a good show lined up, a lot of interesting things to talk about. And on the line with us for the first segment is our very good friend Tom Harris. You there, Tom?
Yeah, I'm right here. How are you, Joseph and Nick?
Well, I kind of feel like a two-legged racehorse. I'm putting out lots of energy. I'm just not getting anywhere. I'm not winning any races.
Yeah. Well, we'll win eventually. You wait.
Tom, Nick lays in bed at night. I'm told. I've not shared a bed with Nick. But I'm told he lies in bed at night and he rehearses his lines, those lines, that one-legged horse and two-legged horse, and my goodness.
One-legged horses are even less successful than two-legged horses are.
Yeah, well, I rehearse when I'm driving my car when I'm doing speeches and stuff, and I'm sure people in the next lane are kind of wondering, who's this guy talking to? There's no phone.
Yeah, but today with Bluetooth technology, you could be talking to somebody on the moon and they'd never know it.
Yeah, but that's the thing
that's true.
With your speakerphone, etc. I do that all the time now. I just pretend that I'm on the phone, right?
On the other side of the coin, I know people.
Do you sing?
No, I
sing in traffic?
Yeah, but if you see, if I had my windows rolled up and I was singing, I would be singing, but I would be making sure that my facial expressions make it look like I was talking on the phone.
Oh, okay.
I will tell you that
on Sunday I start singing lessons, so it's going to be exciting. I'm just warning you guys.
All right, well, we'll keep that in mind. And I must tell you that I did know a lot of people when I was growing up who would talk to the people on the moon long before we ever had the ability. Anyway, how did you, first of all, before we dig into any heavy topics here, you gave a talk at the Aviation Museum to the Canadian Space Agency?
To the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, yeah.
Okay, I knew you'd correct me.
It was great fun. 108 people were there, and it was funny because just as they were introducing me, I realized I left my notes at the back of the auditorium. So I started walking to the back, and here they are introducing me, and I'm walking away. And apparently some of them were thinking, gee, this guy's chickening out. He's got cold feet. And so I got my notes. Here I come. I charged down the aisle, and I did it okay. But it was a bit of a strange way to start a talk by walking away.
Yeah, I did that once, but I didn't leave my notes behind. What I did was I had them on the podium in front of me, and everything fell just as I was going to start. And so, then I had to bend over and pick them up and things like that. Very embarrassing.
Yeah, well, that's what you just make a joke out of it. Okay, so.
Well, the group seemed to really like it. And that's wasn't surprising, of course, because the Royal Astronomical Society are obviously going to agree with what I'm saying about the importance of the space program. But still, it was good practice, 108 people, and they seemed to enjoy it.
How obviously they enjoyed it. What were the comments? What kind of comments did you get when it was over?
Well, they said they hadn't had music in a presentation for decades, and that they really liked the social science aspects because, of course, they're primarily technical and scientific. So, indeed, I got a lot of compliments. It was really fun. Well. So they're going to be a video. There's going to be a video of the whole meeting, not just my presentation, but the others. And I'll send you a link to it because I think, it was a good meeting. There were a lot of amazing things in there about chains of galaxies and really some pretty incredible stuff.
Now, apropos to this discussion, Tom, I hear that the Liberal government is planning to pass legislation banning space junk.
Is that right? And
why not? They ban everything else.
Climate change.
I said that, of course.
That's right. They're going to stop.
I said that, of course, tongue in cheek. What they really want to do is they want to ban single-use plastics in outer space.
Oh, in outer space. Okay. Well, a lot of this stuff is pretty silly to think that we have this kind of magical control over so many things in the environment. I mean, the dumbest thing, Joseph and Nick, is that when Stephen Harper was in opposition, he pointed out that the Liberals under Paul Martin added carbon dioxide to the list of toxic substances that could be controlled under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And sadly, in the whole time that Stephen Harper was in office, he never removed it. So it's still there. Carbon dioxide is listed along with PCBs and lead and mercury and all the things that really are pollution and toxic. But you've got carbon dioxide in there. So a lot of this is a pretty silly argument. And in fact, you're hearing it all the time from Catherine McKenna and from Prime Minister Trudeau that, we have to control carbon pollution and toxic and, come on, it's plant food.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Unfortunately, I hear even the Conservatives from time to time referring to carbon dioxide as pollution as well. So, you can really understand why the public is confused about this, or if they're not confused, they actually, seriously believe in carbon dioxide being the great evil that it actually is portrayed to be, because they're not really hearing the other side of the story. But it's funny because I actually hadn't planned on saying this or talking about this in the context of space exploration, but you have to think that there really are a lot of single-use plastics in the space industry. I would expect.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there are.
It's not like exactly. They bring the stuff back and recycle it.
Well,
no, exactly.
If you think about just your basic amenities you need to exist, everything from toilet paper to feminine hygienic products, all kinds of different things like that.
Well, I don't know what toilet paper you use, Nick, but mine is not single-use plastic.
No, but my point is there's all kinds of things that, because okay, we're getting a little silly here, but think about this.
Oh, like we're getting silly.
Yeah, I know. I'm just matching the silliness of the people in charge of this, our share of the rock. But excuse me. Think about it. If we're trying to save the trees, what's saying they don't ban toilet paper next? And what would they have us use otherwise?
Well, that's a fair question, because if you can't use plastic bags for shopping anymore, then, what are you going to use? You're going to go back to paper bags, and then you recycle paper, I guess. But it's funny because you and I have talked about this, Nick, before, and I don't know if we talked about this with you, Tom, but, one of the ironies of this is that everybody talks about recycling and being environmentally friendly, and as if it's some sort of a new thing. But, if I recall when I was a kid, doing bottle drives and recycling our milk bottles and all of this stuff. So it's really not a new thing. The idea of being, at least in terms of plastics and stuff like that, being environmentally really friendly. I actually want to say something. This past weekend, I was speaking with somebody who was telling me that the flooding or the rising levels of Lake Ontario. Oh, yeah. And the fact that Toronto Islands and the Harbor Islands of Toronto they were worried about flooding there. They were putting sandbags up, that this was a sign of climate change and global warming. And, I mean, I at first I thought he was joking. Then I realized, no, he's serious. So I had to point out to him that Lake Ontario is around 243 feet above sea level. So before rising sea levels can actually reach Lake Ontario, the rest of the country would have to be underwater. So, well, not the whole country, but certainly us. No, we wouldn't be, because we checked this afternoon.
That's right.
Ottawa Airport is 274 feet above sea level. So we would at least be able to congregate at the Ottawa Airport and not be inundated.
Yeah, the thing that he doesn't... Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, sure. Talking about plastic, I think it's important to come back to that a little bit, because last year, Earth Day Network focused specifically, the title for their theme for last year's Earth Day was End Plastic Pollution. That was their term. Now, Patrick Moore, you remember, he was one of the originators of Greenpeace, and he left them when they basically tried to ban chlorine, and became pretty extreme. And here's what he says. He says, plastic is not toxic. He says, it's litter, not pollution. Many people find it unsightly, and the solution is to educate people not to discard it into the environment, and to organize, as is done on highways, to have it removed. Okay, plastic does not poison anything. And yet Earth Day Network said that plastics are, quote, poisoning and injuring marine life. And he points out, he says, it's non-toxic. Do they think our credit cards made with PVC are toxic? But of course, I mean, if you burn them, they're toxic. But generally speaking, they're just simply litter. Okay, they're not pollution, they're not toxic.
Let me, I want to move on to a couple of other things, Tom, if we can. One is the idea that we have, there's two bills that the government's trying to get passed before they rise for the summer. One is Bill C-69, and the other one is the tanker ban out in BC. It's funny how they don't want to ban anything on the East Coast, but that would be Bill C-48. Are you up to speed on those? Can you talk about the kind of impact they'd have?
Not really. No, you have to give me more info on it. I've been focusing in this week specifically on the media attacks on President Trump.
All right, well,
because he's saying things that are. He's saying a lot of smart things, actually.
Well, he's the thing
that's
is,
something you don't hear very often, and I don't mean that as a criticism of Trump. I just, you don't actually hear
people saying,
"Oh, Donald Trump has been saying a lot of smart things lately."
But C-69 and 48, C-69 is the one that changes the regulations for how major projects, or mega projects are approved. And according to the people out west, they have these kind of changes would just kill the energy sector. And Bill C-48 is the tanker ban along the west coast, where you wouldn't be allowed to have Canadian tankers transiting along the northern BC coastline. They exclude American tankers. They exclude the East Coast. So these are some of the problems. But let's stick with something you're a little more up to speed on, and that would be this whole thing about Trump. Give the listener an idea of what it is that he said that you think is bang on. And I'm loath to disagree with you. Matter of fact, I'm not going to, because if you're going where I think you're going, then you're probably bang on.
Well, he calls the global warming scare, he calls it an expensive hoax. Okay, now CNN put out a video yesterday in which they ridiculed him for saying that. So, I think it's interesting, because when the media attacks someone who they don't like, you have to look at it and actually examine the media attacks, because it's very much like World War II, when bomber pilots would get flack when they got near the target. And I have a quote here from the late Sandy Much. He passed away, I believe, last year. He was a World War II Lancaster bomber pilot. And this is what he said. On bombing raids over Europe, we could tell we were closing in on the target when we started to get the most flack. And of course, that's because important German assets were surrounded by anti-aircraft guns, and they filled the sky with anti-aircraft fire. And of course, the flak is the sound of the exploding shells. And Bomber Command wouldn't say, "Oh my goodness, we got shot at, so we have to go somewhere else." No, they'd say, that's exactly where we should go. We should go right back to where the Germans are trying to shoot us down the hardest. And that's exactly why climate realists, people like the three of us, should look at the media attacks against people like Trump and say, they wouldn't bother attacking him unless they were afraid. Okay. And so when Trump says it's an expensive hoax, well, the obvious answer is to say, Yeah. And how much does it cost? Oh, we're spending over $1 billion US a day worldwide on climate finance, according to the San Francisco-based Climate Policy Initiative. And what's the impact on climate? Like nothing. And, you have to say, well, you remember Bjorn Lomborg, he's president of the Copenhagen Climate Center. Just a couple of years ago, he explained that the cost of the Paris Agreement would be $1 to $2 trillion every year to the year 2100 if we actually met our 2030 targets and we kept them all the way to the year 2100. And he points out that the benefit, and this is if you believe the UN climate models, would be 0.3 degree less warming Fahrenheit by 2100. So that's going to cost $1 to $2 trillion a year, every year, to the end of the century. So obviously, when Trump says it's an expensive hoax, well, who can argue with that? I mean, they should simply cite the cost estimates and the forecast results.
Well, all I know is I've been hearing for 10 or 15 years, or possibly a little bit more, that the sea levels are going to rise as a result of global warming. And the minute they start telling me that the sea levels are rising, and give me a number, quantify that, then I'll start to take it seriously. Maybe.
Well, yeah, the amount that it's been rising, and it's not been accelerating, it's been rising for 15,000 years since the end of the last glacial period. And, you have to realize that 8,000 years ago, it was rising about 10 times faster than today because there was a lot more ice to melt. In the last century, we've seen about 7 inches per century rise, and that's not accelerating. And that's going to continue for the foreseeable future. So, yeah, sure, sea level rises, the ice melts gradually in part of the world. In other parts, like the Antarctic, it's actually building up. So what you end up with is a net across the world, according to what I've been able to understand, is that there's virtually no change in ice. But it's interesting because back on May 27th, the New York Times had an article that was more than 2,000 words, and it was entitled "Trump Administration Hardens Its Attack on Climate Science." And the authors were really upset because Trump has talked about having a panel that would actually look at both sides of the climate debate. So you have to say to yourself, not just the New York Times, but the Washington Post and lots of other sources are all really upset about this idea of an open evaluation of the science. Now, you would think that if they were really confident that the science was settled, they'd say, okay, have this evaluation. It'll prove our point, and then we can go forward. But no, they're trying to silence any examination. And I think what it really boils down to is they're afraid that if the lid is lifted off the Pandora's box of the science of climate change, the public will come to understand that we really don't have a clue what the climate's going to be in 50 years. And so they're trying to basically sabotage the efforts to have an open, independent evaluation of the science. And that, of course, tells us that's exactly where we should send our bombers. We should go right there and have an open. Yes, exactly. Every time he brings it up, they go nuts. So that says, good, have that panel and have it soon.
Now, I was just following up on something. I'm sure you've heard about the Glacier National Park in Montana. Perhaps you haven't. So
not recently.
So when you drove into the park, there was a big sign. There were big signs saying that this glaciers will be gone in 2020.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. They've taken it down.
They've taken the signs down.
Gee, I wonder why.
Because in the last several years, the glacier has been expanding.
Yeah.
So it took them a few years to figure
it's interesting. Well, the past winter, according to some scientists, is a harbinger of what's coming, and that is a general global cooling all the way to the middle of the century, because the sun goes into what's called a grand solar minimum around 2060, and the last time that happened, the Earth was quite cold. It was the middle of the Little Ice Age. And it's interesting. If you look at the various solar web pages right now, you can see that the sun has virtually no spots. I mean, we're in a minimum. And so we would expect it to start cooling because sunspots are actually an indication of a more active sun. When the sun would not only be heating the Earth more, But the secondary effect of solar heating might even be more prominent than that first effect. You see, as the sun increases its activity, the solar wind and the magnetic field, they actually act to interfere with incoming cosmic rays from deep space, and those cause clouds. So what you end up with is a more active sun not only heats the Earth directly, but it results in less clouds, because it's pushing away the galactic cosmic rays that would otherwise come into our atmosphere and make clouds. So you got a double effect. You have a less cloudy Earth, which means you have more sunlight coming through and a warmer Earth. And of course, you have a warmer Earth because the sun itself is putting out more energy. So we may very well see that as the sun reduces in activity, we're going to see more clouds and of course, less sun input. And so we may very well be heading to global cooling. And that's what Dr. Ball says. That's what quite a number of scientists are now starting to say. Right. And the frightening thing is that it doesn't take much of a temperature drop on the prairies for us to lose our wheat crop. So a little warming, so what? We can just use farming practices that are in, a bit to the south of us. Cooling, nobody's farming north of us. So that's the real threat. That's the real issue.
But of course, the problem is that we've morphed out of the discussion about global warming, and now we're all about climate change. So the problem with that, Tom, is that when the temperature starts to cool over an extended period of time, we're still going to have the same arguments. People are going to be saying instead that CO2 is in fact causing the global cooling, that global cooling is just one more symptom of climate change that's man-made. I mean, that's my concern.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's a good point, because climate change can include everything. I mean, warming, cooling, more rain, less rain. Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, but the component of climate change.
The Great Lakes have flooded, so the component it must be climate change.
Now,
that's right. There's a professor. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if Joseph's friend had said, look, Lake Superior is putting out more water, therefore Lake Ontario is getting higher, okay, that would make sense, because Superior is higher than Ontario.
Well, the problem, of course, is that all of those rich Toronto residents that live on the islands, okay, are not living on the coast of Lake Superior. So it's very possible. It's possible that the level of Lake Superior was higher than usual this spring.
Well, obviously they don't know geography, because anybody would know water runs downhill except the people living on those islands.
I understand that.
Anyway, I don't want to take any more of Tom's time. So Trump
one thing I just want to, can I just emphasize something here? Apparently within Trump's cabinet, like right in the White House, the majority of them don't want him to challenge the science. Okay. Even, like Larry Kudlow, the president's chief economic advisor, and the former White House strategist, Stephen Bannon, they're against having any kind of re-examination of the science. And they're afraid of the extreme controversy that will undoubtedly result.
Well, I understand that.
If you're going to win a war...
Go ahead.
If you're going to win a war, you have to be prepared to fight. And you can't have these frightened conservatives wanting to avoid a fight and think that they're somehow magically going to win. I mean, there are trillions of dollars at stake. And the left is going to fight tooth and nail if you go after their most vulnerable asset, which is also their most valuable asset, and that is the supposed settled science of climate change. So in fact, what we need is conservatives like Andrew Scheer with the courage and common sense to recognize that unless they're prepared to go along with the scare and actually promote the scare and waste incredible amounts of money and really ruin our economy, they will have to fight. And it will be messy because the left are not going to give in easily. And, Sandy has a quote here, and I think it's a beautiful quote. He says, Sandy Much, he was the World War II Lancaster bomber pilot. And he was a climate realist, by the way, and actually had his own YouTube videos on climate, even in his 90s. He says, no one is asking politicians to risk their lives as my generation did, but they must be strong enough to take the flack that always comes when you're directly attacking your enemy's most important asset. In this case, it's also their most vulnerable asset, because, of course, what he's talking about is the science of climate change. So the fact that the media go nuts is not an excuse for Andrew Scheer and his allies to say, oh my God, we can't address it. No, they have to have enough courage to do what's good for Canada and say, oh, because they're attacking us, we have to go harder on this issue, and we have to use the science that actually supports our point of view. And of course, that would be things like the Non-Governmental International Panel on Climate Change. People can look that up. It's climatechangereconsidered.org. I gave a copy of that directly to Catherine McKenna, and you might remember what she said. She had no idea there were scientists on the other side of the argument, but she also said that it would be heavy to carry the book back to her car.
Well, then you should have volunteered to do it for
her. Really. Yeah, exactly. And she had no clue that there were scientists like Dr. Patterson at Carleton, Ian Clark at Ottawa U. All over the country, there are scientists who say that the climate scare is not based on solid science. She had no idea. So she's being protected, sheltered by her advisors, and I guess she's just giving the script that they give her because she had no clue that these people even existed.
Well, she's not alone. I speak with people all the time about this, and they're shocked to hear that anyone would think that this is a problem, or that there's that perhaps climate change, the way it's been portrayed, is not really a problem. And when I say to them, well, all you have to do is research some of the science, and they go, well, what? Who? They don't, it's like you say, they have no clue that there's actually another side of the argument. And I think, whether you win or lose the argument, the problem is that our politicians, the people who are out there in public, who are supposed to be talking about issues, are afraid to talk about it. And that, I think, is the biggest problem. The biggest problem is with the Conservatives, and I'm not just referring to them here in Canada, is that they don't present the other side of the case. And it's really tragic because behind closed doors, when you talk with these guys, many of whom are personal friends of mine, they are absolute, they're realists, okay? They're skeptical about the so-called consensus, etc. But out in public, they won't talk about it. And unfortunately, they leave the public with the impression that the science, quote unquote, is settled, because if you're not going to argue the point, then how do you expect the public to know about it?
Yeah, and it's funny because I've been told over and over by advisors within the conservative parties here and in other countries that the reason they have to wait until the public come along and then the politicians will follow, and they can't bring up the topic unless the public support it and the media support it. But they have it backwards. There was a study done in the U.S., and I'll send you a link to it. It's really amazing. It was done actually with McGill University, too, so it was partly in Canada. And they found that the major influence on public opinion was the stated opinion of the elite, and in particular, politicians. And they showed that when the Republicans said something different, more realistic to the Democrats, the percentage of the public that actually were realistic about climate greatly rose. But when both sides said the same thing, then most people simply accepted it. So people like Andrew Scheer have to recognize that it's their job to lead the public, not to follow them.
Tom, I have to stop you there. We're at the bottom of the hour. I do appreciate your phone call. Thanks for calling in, and you can always feel free to call in anytime.
Great. Well, thank you, Nick, and so long, Joseph, too. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks for joining us, Nick. Okay, or not Nick.
I've been here all along.
Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Yeah.
And
glad
thanks for joining us, Tom. Okay, that was one of those crazy
a little faux pas there.
On my
part. A little faux
Okay, we have to go for a break. We're at the bottom of the hour, so we'll be back in a few minutes, back into the Combat Zone with Nick and Joe on the Think Radio Network.
Okay, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. Joseph is on my left, which is unusual for him. and I'm sitting center right because I'm in the center of the table, but boy, it's hard to find somebody more right-wing than me. And I wear that as a badge of honor, I got to tell you. All right, thanks for Tom
I
joining
like that,
us.
how you do that. I wear my wings as a badge.
Yes, well, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. As Joseph and I were talking earlier today and talking about what it takes to become a pilot these days, it's one of my dreams is to get my own airplane and to learn how to fly. I know all the theory about it, but of course I don't have time behind the stick, so I'm working on that. Anyway, I just want to thank Tom for joining us.
Housekeeping. Yes.
Help me out.
Thank you, Tom, for joining us.
Absolutely, yes.
And if you want to join us, ladies and gentlemen, you can call us toll-free anywhere in North America, 844-415-2115. That number again, 844-415-2115. And don't worry if you didn't write it down, if I went too fast for you, because it is there on the webpage that you're probably listening to us through right now. Unless, of course, you have some sort of a special way of linking to us that we don't know about. Oh, you could be listening to us right from the Spreaker platform system.
Or they could be communicating telekinetically.
Well, I don't think it would be, maybe telepathically, but I don't know if it would be telekinetically.
Yeah, that's what I meant, telepathically.
I knew that's what you meant, Nick.
Yes, okay.
And don't forget that you can leave comments, but if you're leaving comments in our comments section, at the bottom of the comments, you should click on the refresh comments link from time to time, because it doesn't refresh itself automatically. So if you click on that refresh link, all of the most recent comments will show up, and you can be right up to date in participating in the conversation.
And sometimes those conversations have nothing to do with what we're talking about.
I've noticed. Yeah. It's like
they have their own little family.
Well, it's not that. It's see, the thing is, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. It's the sound of our voices, Nick,
that lulls them to sleep.
Stimulate intelligent debate.
Okay.
Irrespective of what we're saying.
Okay, fair enough.
People do not have to know what we're talking about.
You realize there's a service we're providing by doing this. People pay thousands of dollars to therapists for this same kind of thing.
Yes, and if you want to pay us thousands of dollars, we
by
will. By
all means, there is a donation button.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you feel like donationing, go right ahead.
That's right. Please donation.
That's right. Never mind this make a donation, just donation.
Okay.
Anyway.
And by the way, unlike the Liberal government, we will not ban you.
Oh, yes. Now, yesterday, I went on about 10 or 11 minute rant on Facebook Live about everything that's the fatigue about how the only solution progressives seem to have for problems is either to tax it or ban it. And I am fed up with both.
Or regulate it.
Well, banning is a form of regulation.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Okay, so if you think about it, like there's a city councilor here in the city of Ottawa whose name escapes me at the moment, and I frankly don't care.
He's the new one.
This is his first time
by-election or whatever you want to call it.
It's Coolard or something like that. Coolard.
No, it's the new guy. King, I think, is his name.
Okay, well, whatever his name is, I don't want to give him too much
Roland
credit.
King or something like that.
Something like that. There's an R in there.
I should really. It's very disrespectful of us, Nick, not to know his name before we talk about him behind his back.
And before we call him a blithering idiot.
Yes.
Anyway, he wants to
allegedly.
Yes, and allegedly. Well, I think the evidence is pretty clear, because the reason I say that, and I'm being hard on the guy on purpose, because what he doesn't, either he's ignoring, is just doesn't want to talk about, because he wants to have his 15 minutes of fame. He's decided that the nation's capital of Ottawa needs a total handgun ban. Well, knock, knock, knock. Hello, this is me knocking on his door. We've had a de facto handgun ban in Canada since 1932. Now, I'm sorry. Look, there is nothing harder, or if of all the pieces of property you can buy, one of the hardest things to acquire is a personal sidearm, a pistol, a revolver, anything like that. It's easier to get hunting rifles and shotguns and things like that. But to try to pick up, let's say, a Glock, a 9mm Glock, or if you wanted a 357 Peacemaker, the Pearl-handled set of Colts that General Patton used to wear. Just because you're a collector and you like that kind of stuff, it is very difficult. And even just to take them out to the range to use them is ridiculous, and the kind of hoops you have to jump through. And the other thing that this guy, and I got to give credit to where credit's due, I heard an on-air terrestrial host say on this regard that we've had a ban on murder for centuries, and yet people still murder each other. So how is a handgun ban going to change any of that? The problem is not the inanimate object. So that's one thing. Then they want to ban, the plastic, single-use plastics. Most everybody knows it as the straw ban, the plastic straw ban. Even though the consequences of that ban, one of the reasons why they brought out the plastic straws was for use in the medical field, because people who were disabled or had certain medical conditions couldn't use a paper straw because they start to chew on them and try to eat them. So they came out with sturdy plastic straws with a little flexible joint 3/4 of the way up, so they could take a sip, and there was a reason for doing it.
I never heard that explanation before.
I only found out about it today, so it's not like I was holding anything back. But so there's that. Then they pass a ban on the tanker traffic on the West Coast, but not on the East. It's funny how that works, because that's where all our OPEC oil comes in. Then you've got this new ban on different marine mammals that can no longer be bred in captivity.
Right. Killer whales
and dolphins. So that's what I mean by the only solution they have that they can bring forward isn't a well thought out, well-rounded, how do we do this best to make everybody, I won't say happy, but work together to solve a real problem. It's either ban or tax. Those are the only two answers this government and progressives in general ever have.
Rolson King, by the way.
Rolson King. Okay.
Rolson King.
So, Rolson, you're an idiot. And you know what? I mean that with all due respect to the office.
Yes, it sounds respectful.
No, it doesn't. Not even a little bit. But okay, and I am being hard on him. So for that I apologize. But doggone it, stop and do your homework first. But he wants to have he wants to be consequential. You know the best way to be consequential as an elected official? Go and find out what your constituents have as concerns and go and deal with them.
Well, the thing is about handguns in particular, okay, you already can't walk around with handguns, okay?
That's the point.
The bad guys are already breaking the law when they carry a handgun and use it in the commission of a crime. So making an extra law against them isn't going to make a difference.
Well, if they won't pay attention to the laws we already have, what makes them...
Like, Ottawa's nowhere near a problem, okay? I mean, any death by violence is a problem in the commission of crime, okay? So I'm not diminishing that. I'm not trying to make light of it. But, okay, look, we're not Chicago. And by the way, Chicago has a handgun ban.
Actually, where you see the most handgun deaths are in the most heavily regulated places because only bad guys have them.
Right. New York City also has a handgun ban.
If you go to some of the places where you have concealed carry, the number of deaths by handguns is much lower than it is in places like, Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago.
Right. I don't know. I'm not trying to draw a connection there, Nick. I'm not going to say that the fact that you can conceal a handgun and use it to defend yourself keeps handgun crime down. Maybe there is a cause and effect there, but whether there is or there isn't, I mean, the fact is, we are always hearing about how conservatives need to have a fact-based, research-based, evidence-based policy. And I think to myself, gosh, we're the only people that have evidence-based policy. I don't know. I'm struggling here to find the right words to express how absurd, how stupid some of the stuff that I hear from the left out there is.
It's just
like, again, really. I have to say this again, Nick, over and over again. I'm going to keep saying this through the night. Okay, Lake Ontario's rising because of climate change, because of the sea level rises.
Yeah, we'd all. Really? You would have drowned. You would have drowned Kingston. You would have drowned Lake Ontario. Let me think. Then, because let's see,
Montreal.
Montreal be underwater. Quebec City be underwater.
Yeah, everything out there.
Halifax would be underwater.
Yep, well,
the Gaspé would be a lot of it underwater.
Yeah.
St. John's, New Brunswick would be underwater. A good chunk of St. John's, Newfoundland would be underwater. And yet we don't see any of that. I mean, it's just first. One of the things I like to do with people who scream about, "Oh my God, the sea is rising," where is it rising? Well, they point to the Maldives. Well, then we look at Holland.
Okay, but just remember, and I know they don't teach this in high school geography anymore, but there is such a thing as erosion.
Yes, well, that was my answer to Maldives. That's more erosion than anything else. But let's say if you want to believe that, here's what you have to believe, because we're not seeing it in Miami, are we? And Miami is at sea level for all intents and purposes. Okay? So have you ever tried to fill half a bathtub, the left half or the right half, without filling the other half? All the world's oceans are connected. So you can't fill one without filling the others. Do you know how much water it would take? Now, you and I have been to sea. We know how big those oceans are. Just to raise the level 1 inch takes so much water, it boggles the imagination.
Well, all I know is I'll start taking it seriously, as I said earlier, when I stop hearing about how the sea levels are going to rise and I start hearing that the sea levels have risen. Don't tell me the sea levels are going to rise 1 inch in the next 50 years. Okay, because I've been hearing that for the last 20 years. So at some point in time, the sea levels have to be rising as a result of global warming. But of course, it's not. This is what's going to happen, Nick, unless our politicians challenge the science, and they can, because there's good science on the other side of this argument. We're just going to keep on stumbling along and following, these lemmings over the cliff with regards to climate change policy or trying to combat climate change. And what's going to end up happening next is, as the Earth starts to cool, because we're heading into we think we're heading into a cooling period,
which is far worse than global warming, by the way.
All they're going to do is they're going to say more man-made climate change.
But you know something? Even in that case, I have an even simpler test about when it comes to how I know when they're taking it seriously. When they ban Perrier and carbonized drinks,
yeah.
Then you know they're serious. When there's no more
what?
Bubbles in the champagne, which they guzzle by the gallon, then you know they're serious.
Well, hang on a second here. Okay, now you may be onto something here, Nick, and that is, this is Canada. What about beer? Beer.
Absolutely. When they insist you drink flat beer or they take beer off the shelves altogether because of its carbon footprint,
absolutely,
then you know they're serious.
Yeah.
Until then, stuff it.
And when they start to do that, I think Canadians are going to start to take them a little seriously.
Or a little less seriously.
Okay, and then it'll be a darn good thing that we've banned handguns in Ottawa.
Oh, man. The only handgun I know of in Ottawa is in the museum. The one that Darcy McGee was shot with.
Oh, yeah, I know of other handguns in Ottawa. You can get... In truth, okay, we make fun of that, but you can purchase a handgun, certain handguns for target and stuff like that, for target shooting and what have you. So when we talk about a ban, it's not like they don't exist in that. So, I mean, look, let's be honest and let's be accurate about it. But you can't just carry them around in your pocket.
It's not like
it's not like that.
You're not strapping a holster to your thigh.
Absolutely not.
But you know something? One of the things that people don't have forgotten is pistol shooting, target shooting is a lot of fun. That's why people do it. They enjoy it. Taking a piece of paper and poking holes in the middle of it, as close to the middle as you can get from 20 yards away, they don't get it because they've never done it. They wouldn't know. A lot of these people who scream for these handgun bans say, I hate handguns. Well, fine, don't own one. But the point is, if they've ever fired one at a paper target and tried to hit the middle, they realize it's challenging and is actually a lot of fun. And they want to get rid of, it's like they want to extinguish everything that's fun in life. Like here, again, I go back to the city of Ottawa. Now they want to, and this is not unique to Ottawa. This is not the only place to do it. It's just the latest, or at least consider it. They want to go to a zero, I forget the name. There's a motion coming before city council, something to do with zero. I forget what it is, but they want to have 0 deaths with bicycles, zero death and injuries. Okay. Now, what they want to do is make every road in the city. Now, Ottawa is not Toronto, but it does have about 1 million people in it. And there's several thousand miles of road within the confines of the city of Ottawa.
Correct.
And they want to make them all perfectly safe for bikes. That means elevated bike lanes. That means putting in the little cement posts and pillars to keep the cars away from the bikes and so on.
You mean like they've done on Laurier Avenue where cyclists still get killed?
Nope. They want absolute solid dividers.
So what I want to know, this is then what I want, an admission from engineers and politicians of the city of Ottawa that their grand plan for making Laurier Avenue bicycle safe is a failure.
You're going to, when you get that?
They were wrong.
You know when you're going to get that admission?
When hell freezes over.
No, there is a time when Jim Watson admits that the LRT program in the city has been a bigger, more colossal disaster than the Orga World contract program, the green bin program. Okay. And you know when that's going to happen.
Okay, we're too
focused. I know.
We're too locally focused now, and because I want to go back to this ban thing.
Sure.
And particularly the idea of banning these tankers from the West Coast, which is actually targeted at Alberta oil. And one of the things that we're hearing more and more of now, Nick, is this Western alienation and even Western separation, where people in Alberta are actually saying we should be going it alone, we should be an independent state. Now, I don't subscribe to that. I think it's foolish myself, but I understand the frustration.
I do too. And you have to, it's like a marriage, right? Sooner or later, if there's abuse on one side, the other side says, how much of this am I going to put up with? Now, I don't think they're quite ready yet. And to say, that's it, we're out of here. Because there are some real consequences. You have, all of that, the tearing up of the country would be messy, and it would be, economically disastrous for both parties, blah, 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 all those things. But Jason Kenney was accused by Justin Trudeau of playing footloose and fancy-free with national unity. And I'm thinking to myself, did he really just say that? Because if anybody's been playing footloose and fancy-free with national unity, it's not Jason Kenney, it's not Gerald Ford, it's not Doug Ford, it's not the Premier of Saskatchewan or New Brunswick or any of the other premiers that are on side with Jason Kenney. It's Justin Trudeau, because he keeps trying to kill the energy sector upon which many of those provinces depend. And that is the fuel that's fanning this flame. That's why these people feel so frustrated. Look, if you look at the history of this country, there have been times when, and you pointed this out earlier today, when regions of the country have prospered or suffered, and it's not always the same group. Like for a while, Ontario was the heartbeat of the economy. Now it's Alberta. Okay, Ontario's coming back, but it's going to take a little while. The Maritimes have always been, kind of the poor child of the family. But, and I don't mean any disrespect to the people of the Maritimes. I think they're great people. I lived out there for quite a while. But the bottom line is, right now, if you have people who are feeling like they want to leave the marriage, that's their perception right now. And they don't care about what happened 50 years ago. They care about what's going on now. And that's the danger, is that these people are feeling like they've been shafted by this government, and they're sick and tired of it. And to them, a lot of them have said, why are we putting up with this? And if Justin Trudeau survives and goes on to implement Bill C-69 and Bill C-48, I'm not saying they'll separate, but he's not going to do anything to bring the country together. It's going to cause those cracks to deepen. And one of these days, it may become beyond repair. And that's the danger. It's not Jason Kenney the problem here. It's Justin Trudeau.
Yeah. I hear you, Nick. I'm just looking up this thing in California, Nick, because, You know what? What time is it? We've got a few minutes here before the top of the hour. We haven't done a stupid politician segment for a while, so let's just skip the introduction and go right to the stupid politicians. Where in California, they're discussing a bill right now, lawmakers, to determine whether or not the term a renewable energy should be expanded to include hydroelectricity. And of course, some lawmakers think it should be, but a lot of lawmakers in California apparently think that it should not be. Because if we define hydroelectricity, which, by the way, is eminently renewable.
That's what's so ridiculous about it.
If we're going to define hydroelectricity as renewable, then that's going to take away the emphasis from wind and solar power. And so the whole argument, what this does is it tears the shroud, the veil off of the renewable energy farce argument and shows what it really is. And that is just a way of saying we want solar power or wind power. Because, as I say, there is nothing more renewable, more plentiful than hydroelectricity. And in hydroelectricity, the carbon footprint for the generation of hydroelectricity is zero. No carbon footprint. Not that I care, but if you care about that kind of thing, then you should be.
You see, these environmentalists should be all over this, putting up new hydroelectric dams to handle and to harness the energy inherent in our rivers. Now, I don't want every river dammed. I don't think you need to go that far. But I do think that, because I know that they have taken out about 900 flood control dams in the Midwest of the United States. And it's one of the reasons why you're seeing long-lasting droughts out there, because there's nothing to hold the water back, and there's no crops. There's no, the trees are, because there's a multifaceted problem, but that because of their policies around logging, around water management, around land management, have all led to a situation where there's nothing to keep the water on the land long enough for it to soak in and fill aquifers. So you have created a problem by trying to save the planet. Leave the planet alone. You know, take what resources are there and work with them. You're not getting rid of it. Like if you dam a river, yes, there's going to be some ecological impact. But at the same time, you also create a whole new environment that wasn't there before. Think of the fish species and of all the birds that live off those fish, that live on the cliffs and so on, peregrine falcons and so on. These kinds of things. It's just, you know what? Sometimes I wish we could just ban stupidity.
Well, you're going to have to start with the Sierra Club, because according to Catherine Phillips with the Sierra Club, she's the executive director of the Sierra Club of California, when she was discussing this bill to expand the definition of renewable energy to include hydroelectricity, she pointed out that if they were going to make that change, that, and I'm quoting, it would slow the development of clean renewables. It would stall us. It would stall us on the progress that we've been making. I mean, that's her statement. I'm trying to think of what, is that a non sequitur? I don't get it. Okay.
Is she sucking on a helium bottle?
I don't know, because I didn't hear her say it. I'm only reading the comments.
Because it makes about as much sense as a drunk sailor on helium.
A drunk sailor on helium?
Yeah.
When did you practice that one?
I just came up with it.
Okay, that is a good one to come up with.
Hey, believe me, my mind never quits.
Anyway, listen, you guys down in California, okay, if there's anyone listening down there, maybe call in and explain to us what is the problem. We just don't get it. Remember, you can call us toll free anywhere in North America. If you want to. But we're happy just talking amongst ourselves and having a lively debate in our comments section. Because that, Nick, is what we do. We are having too much fun.
You know something?
What was it that Rush Limbaugh used to say? Taking on the left with one arm tied behind my back.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Or half my brain tied
behind my back. That was
something
it.
Like that. Sounds like something that Lowell would say.
Yeah, well, if I'd have thought of it first, but he coined a phrase first.
Well,
so.
I think you should work on it, Nick. I think you should find a way to incorporate that into. It could be one of your cliches.
Well, here's one way to put it. this horse with 2 legs could beat any of their horses with 4.
Okay. And while I am trying to picture that and understand,
the question is, which leg are you?
Yeah,
the front left or the back right?
Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, I think it is time for us to go for a break. So we will be back in about 2 or 3 minutes right here in the Combat Zone with Nick and Joe on the Think Radio Network. Okay, I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you are back in the Combat Zone with, yes, you guessed it, Joe and Nick.
That would be me, one of them.
And we've had to calm down a little bit here, just relax, massage our temples, take a tranquilizer or two. What we are not doing tonight is drinking alcohol while we speak. And by the way, for those of you who are following hockey, tonight is Game 7 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. As of right this moment, the score is tied still no, it's not tied. What am I thinking?
I don't know.
It's 2-0 for St. Louis at the end of the second period. So things not looking so good for the Boston Bruins.
Well, you never count them out. They're a heck of a hockey team. And they've got an incredible goalie. But you know what's interesting? There's a very interesting sideline to this, and we'll get back into the serious stuff here in a minute. But one of the fascinating parts of this whole story is Craig Millington, who is the St. Louis Blues goalie, is playing in his rookie year, and he's playing in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup.
Right.
How many goalies never make the Stanley Cup playoffs, never mind the finals?
True enough, but my recollection is, I don't think they got all the way to the finals, but there was Steve Penny, brought the Montreal Canadiens in his rookie year very deep into the playoffs.
Didn't Ken Dryden do it?
Ken Dryden did it in his rookie year.
But you must admit it's rare.
I admit it's rare. And then I'm not sure, but I have to look at, I'm not sure if Patrick Waugh did when he was goalie of the Canadiens. So there would be 3 examples.
But
yeah, so it interesting. Now, Nick, I don't know why you're saying before we get back into the serious stuff, because I'm looking at our topics and I can't find anything more serious to talk about here. Because the stuff that we have to talk about just isn't serious. It's comical. It's laughable. It's Keystone Cops.
You got that right.
Okay, and, I'm the guy that tries to be fair and balanced. So on this show, I have repeatedly defended Prime Minister Trudeau, and I've taken a lot of flack from people who – nobody stops me on the street because they don't recognize me, but people who know, who listen to the show, who know that it's me – sorry, I had a little bit of something there that I had to cough. They go, oh, you must love that Pierre. Not Pierre Trudeau. Pierre's the dad. Justin Trudeau. And I go, I really don't. I just, I give the guy a break. Let's not be super hyper partisan and think that everything that Justin Trudeau does is bad. But I'm really having a hard time swallowing this latest thing, Nick, and that is the appointment of an ambassador for women, peace, and security.
You realize we already have a department for peace and security. You realize that, right?
We already have an ambassador for peace and security?
No. We have a department for that.
A whole department that's set up for...
A whole department with a budget about $30 billion.
Right.
It's called National Defense.
Right.
We don't need this nonsense. And to have an ambassador, a female ambassador, to promote women's issues, which is what this is really all about, okay, is nothing but, in my estimation, is nothing but an attempt by Trudeau to repair his damaged feminist credentials. The guy, first of all, the guy doesn't even know what the word means. Never mind, be one. Because he's anything but. He's just an opportunist. He is, he's a groper. He's just, he doesn't. He is.
You just can't let that groping business
because
go.
Anybody else would have got hung from a church spire for that, and yet he gets a pass because the media loves the guy. So, maybe she remembered it differently. I'm sorry, if you grab some lady's bottom, she's going to remember it exactly right.
Okay.
And if we're supposed to believe the victim, how come he gets off? So,
okay. But I'm trying to wrap my mind around this idea that, okay, so here, let's just take your argument at face value, okay? You're saying we don't have to have an ambassador for women's issue.
No.
Okay, fine. Whether we should or we shouldn't, let's remember that that's not what this is. This is an ambassador for women, peace, and security. Now, how you wrap those three things up into one ambassador, and I guess this must be a roaming ambassador. So what happens, does this ambassador, and I'm assuming, I don't even know who they appointed, but I'm assuming it's a she. Does she go and does she go to London and undermine our High Commissioner in London, for instance? And by the way, yes, I said High Commissioner, not ambassador, because we do not have ambassadors to other Commonwealth countries. Or
by the way, her name is Jacqueline. Jacqueline O'Neill. Here's her credentials. She has served on a number of related international bodies, assumes new diplomatic post. O'Neill will also provide advice in the government on how to protect the rights of women and girls who face violence and insecurity. Okay, look.
A worthy subject, but do we have to have an ambassador to do that? Like, are we not doing that already in the course of our normal diplomatic activity?
Well, that's the whole point. Why are they separating us by gender? If you believe in human rights, who cares about the gender?
And I want to know, since you've introduced the topic, Nick, okay, since you've scratched that surface, I'd like to know, is this a woman? Or is it is she transgendered? Or what is it?
It appears that she's
biological.
Two-spirited. That part they don't get into.
I'm sorry. I'm at a loss. I'm trying to remember that alphabet soup from last week, but
forget it. It changed. It'll be different this week anyway.
I'm being silly and facetious now. Okay, I'm struggling to find something to latch onto in this conversation, and I can't find it.
The question we should be asking: is it possible for this government to float more inept, more completely incompetent ministers of the crown?
Well, these guys, in fairness, these guys may not be incompetent. They're irrelevant. It's worse than incompetence, Nick. It's, what are you doing? We're saving the dolphins and the orcas. Okay. We're banning single-use plastics without a plan because, everybody's talking about straws and water bottles, but what about garbage bags? Okay. What about shopping bags?
Well,
there's all these, and what about syringes in the medical profession?
When asked about this during that press conference with that beautiful lake in the background, he had no idea. He wasn't sure. They said, well, we'll figure that out later. No, if you make a policy announcement or if you make a major announcement like that, like why did you go through all the trouble of finding the perfect spot, bringing everybody out there, setting it all up like, this wonderful announcement, go through all those trappings, and then not have the details?
Okay. So we have the plastic ban. We have the carbon tax to reduce carbon dioxide to save the planet, because everybody knows that Canada's the problem, if you believe in man-made climate change that's being induced by the production of carbon dioxide. If you believe that, well, then you might as well believe that Canada's the problem. We're saving dolphins and orcas. We're banning tanker traffic on the West Coast, but not the East Coast. Okay. What else are we doing? There's the ambassador for women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see, what else? Aboriginal women who were murdered is an indication of the genocide of Aboriginal.
Yeah.
I want to say Aboriginal women, but if it's just Aboriginal women, there wouldn't really be a genocide. But, no, I guess you could make the argument that it is. And then let's not forget all of the alphabet soup of different genders that are included in that. It's so asinine.
Well,
you know,
you've got serious issues
It's not
out
even
there.
liberalism, okay? I don't know what you call this.
Nonsense.
Okay, it's not. This is not a liberal versus conservative thing.
No,
It is so disconnected from the real world.
It's the mice running the lab. I mean, this is insane. We just had a little while ago two Canadian girls or women in Ghana get kidnapped. You know who just rescued them? The Ghanaian military. Okay, now I'm not knocking them, but they're not exactly what you call a first world army. What the heck? Now, I don't know what JTF2 is doing or CSOR. Maybe they participated in it.
These are military.
Yeah, JTF2 is our elite special forces who are trained specifically for these kinds of events. And while I understand their need for secrecy, they should get a little credit if they're involved in doing things. Like, you might wait a year or two before you say, by the way, that was JTF2 that did that. Okay? Because those guys, they are doing the dirtiest of the dirty work. And the Canadian Special Operations Regiment, which is another elite unit. Okay, they are going around the world doing the dirtiest of the dirty work too, and you never hear anything about them. So the point I'm making is, if they weren't used, why not? Now, we may not know for a little while. In other words, what I'm trying to say really is there are important, serious issues that are being neglected for the sake of absolutely popcorn and candy floss issues here at home. Carnival issues, let's call them that. Talk about sending the clowns. You've got the relationship with China. You've got the damaged relationship with India. You've got a relationship that we have to work on with the United States. Everywhere we turn, we have people in high office. Isn't that right, Mrs. Freeland, or Miss Freeland, whatever the heck you're calling yourself these days, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, saying that a dictatorship like Cuba has to have something to do with the reestablishment of democracy in a dictatorship like Venezuela. I mean, give me a break. If this is the best you can field, take your bat and go home. It's just outrageous how totally, and in my mind, it's incompetence and just absolute ineptness by this, if not by the people he appoints, then certainly by the Prime Minister himself.
Well, do these people that sit around the cabinet table actually believe that the things that they're addressing are real problems, and that what they're proposing to do to address these alleged real problems are, in fact, going to help? I mean, that's what boggles my mind, Nick, is that all of this, okay, is just so disconnected from reality. I mean, it's like, guys, I know that marijuana smoking is legal now in Canada, but really, can you lay off of it for a little while and get back to the real world?
It just goes on.
Maybe they're doing a little bit of too much of that LSD microdosing or whatever.
Yeah, I remember covering that.
We were talking about that a few weeks ago.
About a month ago, yeah.
I think they're macrodosing or whatever. I don't know.
They're on some kind of trip.
That's the only. It just leaves people speechless.
And believe me, there is more. Like, you have, on one hand, the Prime Minister just cut pension funds for the military by a little over $1 billion. I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but it's over $1 billion. At the same time, under the guise of saving money. At the same time, just the week before, he announced $14 billion to go overseas.
Over the next 10 years.
Okay, $1.4 billion a year, $14 billion.
Yeah.
Now, this all happens if they get elected, but let's keep our collective pants on here. But the point is that he's promised that money to countries over which we have no influence and will never get that money back, so that their women can have abortions. I'm sorry, that's none of our affair. We have issues here at home that money would be much better served. How about the homeless? How about homeless vets? How about the military in general? Do you think the military could use an extra $14 billion? They have a whole surface fleet to rebuild. They've got tankers to build. They've got aircraft to buy. They've got armored personnel carriers that need upgrading. The list is endless.
Well, you don't even have to look at the military. Look at education. Look at healthcare.
Well, that's a provincial matter.
Now,
but
what the federal government gives grants for these kinds of things too, and the federal government partially funds healthcare. Now, I don't believe for a minute that you solve our education problems or our healthcare problems by throwing more money at these initiatives and these departments. But certainly people on the left do. So my question is, why, if you're on the left, politically speaking, why aren't you up in arms about sending money overseas in the tens of billions of dollars to pursue this pro-abortion agenda, okay, when people here are waiting for surgery, and allegedly the reason they're waiting for surgery is because the big bad conservatives like Doug Ford allegedly are cutting money out of healthcare.
Well,
so if throwing more money at the problem is the answer, then why aren't you complaining and saying to Trudeau, listen, spend the money here, solving the problems here that need to be solved?
Look at the other issue to think about along this line is you have areas like palliative care. Seniors, there's going to be a wave of seniors who are going to need long-term care, and people who have head injuries and so on. In other words, there are all kinds of places. If you started to total up, and we should do this sometime, $250 million to third-world tin pot dictators around the world, most of them in the Middle East, that went out the door almost from the day he got elected. You got $10.5 million to a terrorist. You got $14 billion going out the door for abortions overseas. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And if my memory serves me correctly, he even gave $600 million to the Clinton Foundation. And then on top of that, you got another $600 million that he gave to the print press to buy favor with them between now and the election. So if you started to total up that money that never should have gone to any of those places, think of what we could have done. You and I were just kind of musing about maglev trains between, let's say, Quebec City or someplace in the Maritimes. Let's take Halifax and Toronto. Okay? I'm not suggesting that'll happen tomorrow, but if you were going to invest in infrastructure that gets people on trains again, that might not be a bad place to put it. There's certainly worse place to put it. And yet, this is unbelievable willingness to throw our money away on things we simply don't have any control over. And the people we give it to are ungrateful, don't like us, and it just goes on and on and on.
Now, you just mentioned something in passing that we actually were intending to talk about in the next segment. But since you touched on it, and we have some time here before the next break, I want to get into this, Nick, because it's really apropos to this whole discussion about being disconnected from reality, okay? And that is the notion that Cuba has any role to play in restoring democracy in Venezuela. I mean, how can you possibly be on staff? Like, how could you be a diplomat? How could you be a foreign affairs minister? How could you be a cabinet minister? How could you even be a member of parliament and not know that Cuba is not a democracy? And if you know that Cuba is not a democracy, how could you possibly take the position that Cuba has a role to play in restoring democracy anywhere in the world, let alone Venezuela? I mean, that is one of those, every now and then I think to myself, I've heard it all until and then every time I think that to myself, or I say it to myself, someone comes along and proves me wrong. That is one of those jaw-dropping things, Nick.
She should be so embarrassed. The public should pillory her right out of office over this. It's astoundingly stupid. And there's no other way to put it. And you know me, I don't pull my punches anyway, but this is, of all the things I've heard come out of this government, this is about as dumb as it gets. And that's saying something, because they have had some doozies, like the economy will grow from the heart. I mean, come on. But this, You have one dictatorship telling another dictatorship how to resurrect democracy? Are you nuts?
Well, can we promote democracy in Cuba? Actually, it makes just as much sense to say that Venezuela should be promoting democracy in Cuba.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
oh
just my goodness
enough
gracious.
To drive a grown man to drink. And by the way, it's now 3-0 for St. Louis with 8 minutes and 35 seconds left in the third period.
Okay, guys, St. Louis Blues about to win their first Stanley Cup ever.
Are we ready to call it yet? It's almost like election night.
Yes.
You're calling
Hillary. I'm calling it for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, good luck with that. I'm going with the Black Horse.
No. Joe Biden. I think we should start.
Don't do that when I'm about to take a drink of non-alcoholic beverage.
It's Joe Biden. I'm calling the election for Joe Biden right now. I mean, they practically have been calling the election, which is what 16 months away.
Oh, at least
for Joe Biden.
Yeah,
already.
He still has well over.
I don't want to
get
too deep into American politics, right? Well, we should. We should get. I should talk to some of our guys down the States.
You know what? You surprised the crap out of me today because I thought I knew the answer, but you asked me who's third in line for the presidency should the president and the vice president meet some untimely fate.
Right.
I thought it was going to be
Speaker of the House.
Yeah, well, you know who that is.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi.
Can you imagine?
Are you listening down there? Hang on. Listen, you Americans down there, okay? I don't care whether you're Democrats or independents or Republicans, okay? Do you understand that Nancy Pelosi is third in line to the presidency? Why? Really, guys? Oh dear. That's almost as bad as Justin Trudeau.
Well, no. Well, you know what? She would give Justin Trudeau a run for her money. The idea of the Wicked Witch of the West getting a hold of the reins of power of the most powerful nation in the world with the nuclear suitcase and everything that goes with it is simply terrifying. That woman is certifiable. How she keeps getting elected, well, that says something. She's from California, so maybe I shouldn't be that surprised. But at the same time, oh my Lord, please, Mr. Trump, get regular checkups.
Yeah. Now, Marin writes about the Freeland comment about Cuba that she might have been just trying to irritate Trump or responding to Trump, who has been claiming that there's a significant Cuban military presence in Venezuela right now. Marin, actually, I don't know whether you realize this or not, but there actually is a significant Cuban military presence in Venezuela. He's not wrong about that. So I don't know what and the Russian, right? So I don't know what the implication of that is, but that is the case. So. But it could be that she's thinking, Marin, she could be that Minister Freeland is thinking that that's the reason why the Cubans have a military presence.
Well, she did a real awful job.
Because they are going to impose democracy on those
I'm sure
Venezuelans.
Cuba's going to impose democracy on Venezuela.
That's right. They're going to impose democracy communist style.
Yeah, we all know how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you don't like our policy? Hey, take them out back.
Well, of course, you always knew that you always could recognize the communist dictatorships because they always had democratic in their name.
Absolutely.
The Democratic Republic of Germany.
Right. Or the New Democratic...
The People's Democratic Republic of North Korea or something. Yeah,
that's
like
the one I was trying to think. Or the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Right.
I mean, about as democratic as the
Democratic Party of the United States.
Okay, yeah, that'll work. But
okay, I'm starting to get silly now. I'm just
well, it's not
a little bit too hyper partisan there, Nick.
Oh,
I think we should be giving these guys the
benefit of the doubt.
The benefit.
Don't you have to have you have to be able to draw an intelligent breath to be given the benefit of the doubt.
This is Funny Farm. We're on. It's. I don't know what they're smoking, but clearly it's wafting into our studio here in the bunker.
I think the Keystone Cops would do a better job of running Canada And by extension, the United States, if the Democrats ever took over.
How about the Little Rascals?
Oh, my God.
But the original Little Rascals.
Yeah, with Spanky and Alfalfa.
Well, now they used all of those. They used all of those names in the when they had a movie, right? It was a movie, right? So the modern Little Rascals used all those names. So don't be confused, guys. We're talking about the original Little Rascals,
the 1930s
from the 1930s series,
with a little black and white, and that was a really funny series. And they had, I'll never forget Alfalfa. That hairdo was priceless. Where he had that one spike of hair sticking up out of his head. And I saw the other one, and it just wasn't the same. It's like watching the modern reincarnation of the movie Aladdin compared to the original. I had a couple of kids go to see it because we really liked and enjoyed the first one with Robin Williams and people like that in it. And it was just a fun, entertaining movie to watch. But the modern one, they completely feminized it. And my girls came home and said, Dad, don't bother, you'll hate it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
because they took the character Jasmine, and in the original, she didn't want anything to do with power. She wanted to get away from the palace. She didn't want to be the queen or anything like that. And in this modern one, they flipped that all around, and now she's nothing but hungry for power. She wants to be on the throne. And that is a complete reversal of the whole point of the story.
I don't know the story at all.
Well, just imagine what happens when you rub a lamp and a genie comes out.
If I rub the lamp and a genie comes out, I'm trying to think of something to say.
I actually have a friend of mine who told me a story about where that actually happened to him.
Okay, let's hold that. Let's hold that until we get back from the next break, okay?
All right, and it's still 3-0 for St. Louis.
All right, so we'll be back in a couple of minutes here in the Combat Zone with Nick and Joe.
All right, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. The excuse me, not the laugh-ass hour, the last half hour straight ahead. And for those of you who are paying attention, St. Louis is now up 4-0 with about 4 minutes left in the game. Or I'll tell you exactly.
Nick, you came back in there, Nick, with too much energy. You guys,
I told you that wasn't going to work.
If you're listening to this not live but on the podcast, then you don't get to hear the nice, relaxing music that we put in. It was a Paganini piece.
All right,
nice violin for 3.5 minutes or thereabouts, and your blood pressure should have gone down.
It did.
Your energy should be. You should be feeling. It's not shooting out from you like lightning bolts. Okay, that's it.
Joseph just put me to sleep.
Yeah, I've lots of people say that about me.
Yeah, you did it on purpose.
Yes. Sleep.
No, I'm sorry. I get in a groove and
sleep.
I as much as I
sleep.
Okay, so it's 4-0 Boston. They're 4-0 Boston. 4-0 St. Louis. With 4 minutes left. So it looks like St. Louis is going to win the Stanley Cup. I'm calling it now.
Okay.
St. Louis will win.
Well, I'm still calling Joe Biden.
You're still calling Joe Biden. Okay.
And what is the Liberal Party motto?
We are the government. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Okay. Quickly followed by the Justin Trudeau salute.
And you think I have too much fun with this show.
Okay, now we are getting silly.
Yes, but it's okay. It's a Wednesday night. Hockey's almost over for the rest of the summer, but we'll live with that.
No, doesn't training camp start?
Yeah, about
2
or 3
weeks.
Yeah, but they don't
season.
start playing again till
I can't take hockey seriously in June. I'm sorry.
Well, it is the last game. It's only the 12th of June. But did you know historically when the Stanley Cup was played for? In April.
Well, I remember watching playoff games and certainly beginning of May it was done.
Yeah.
But the really important news is that it's 2019 and only a few months until Rugby World Cup.
I'm sorry, what?
Rugby World Cup.
Is that a
would
thing?
be rugby for you, all of you listening out there? That would be rugby union, not that sissy rugby league stuff. Okay, I just want to throw that in.
Is that a game?
Yeah. Okay, you're just having fun with me, Nick.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, on to more serious stuff.
I don't know.
Do we have anything serious to talk about?
Yeah, we do, and that is there is now more than just the odd grumble. There is a move. Let me bring the story up here. People are actually seriously talking about Canada leaving the United Nations, and it can't happen fast enough, in my very humble opinion. Let me just...
never going to happen.
No, I agree. But it's certainly not in any time... not anytime soon, as much as I wish it would. I hate the United Nations with all of my being. The question they asked at this... it comes from the Marshall Report. Are you ready to leave the UN and their agenda? And here's the first paragraph. Trump is exposing all he can expose to the rest. The rest is up to we, the people. The establishment is angry at the American people for waking up. The United Nations is being exposed for the real goals and ambitions which are global and far from nation building. Amen to that. I've been saying that for years. Any organization that has world, to run the whole show. I'm loath to say the phrase "a one world government," but I really think that's what's driving this. They meddle in the internal affairs of member states. Like, how many times have we seen the UN come to Canada and shake their finger at us, right, for the way we treat our Indigenous people, for the way we do this, for the way we do that? It's none of their business. And if I was Prime Minister, I'd greet them when they land in Toronto or they land in Ottawa with an RCMP escort, take them in, let them go to the bathroom, give them a sandwich, put them right back on the plane, and send them back to Brussels and New York.
Well, you see, I wouldn't let them in at all that way. I'd insist that anyone with a UN passport has to have a visa to get into Canada.
Yeah, okay.
And then just deny them their visas all the time.
That's okay. That works too. But the bottom line is their presence on Canadian soil would be unwelcome. Yeah. And I would recall the ambassador and hang the most Canadian sign I can think of on the doorknob: "Gone fishing permanently." I don't leave a message. I don't check them.
Or we're busy watching the Stanley Cup playoffs.
That's right. Speaking of which, where are they?
Okay, this is your live update. Of course, you're not going to really care if you're listening to this, a week or a year from now on the podcast. But it must be pretty close to the final whistle.
1 minute, 14 seconds left. Boston has scored.
Okay.
4-1.
They only have to score 3 more goals.
In 1 minute and 14 seconds.
Okay. They could do it.
They could.
They
Good
could.
Luck with that.
They could. No, they couldn't do it.
Well,
they're not
Boston's
playing.
Pulled the goalie.
They're not playing the Toronto Maple Leafs, so it's not going to happen.
Listen, other than St. Louis, Boston is the only team to take them to 7 games. And nobody's taking them to overtime.
Okay. Well,
so whether you like it or not,
didn't Boston score 7 goals or something like that in the final 5 minutes against Toronto last year?
I have no memory of that.
In Game 7?
I have no memory of that. That I went back and deleted from my memory. Tomorrow.
If the Raptors win.
If the Raptors win, it's over tomorrow.
Of course, it's all this patriotism stuff, but here's my question. How many Canadians are on the Raptors roster? Try that one 30 times quickly.
I don't think there's any.
Raptors roster.
Yeah, you'll hurt yourself.
Guys, I'm really not drinking. Well, I'm not drinking anything
But
alcohol.
You know what? There's a lot of Canadians on that St. Louis Blues team and on the Boston team.
That's true, because it's ice hockey.
Well, there is no ice hockey. There's hockey.
Well, no, you can play field hockey.
Yes, but when you have to specify
there's
field
floor hockey, there's ball hockey.
But when you mention the word hockey, hockey happens naturally on the ice.
No.
You don't need the word
hockey. No, hockey was invented as a field sport.
That depends on who you listen to.
Oh, for Pete's sake, Nick. Okay, back to Freelander and Freeland. and Cuba.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. St. Louis has done it, and the place goes quiet because they're playing in Boston. But St. Louis is pretty happy about it.
I'll bet.
So I can dump that now.
Okay, that's it.
Yep.
So congratulations to the St. Louis Blues, who have just won Lord Stanley's Cup.
The most coveted trophy in sports. The hardest to win in sports.
I don't know. It could be.
It is. No, there's no question. It is.
But the Grey Cup, though, is the oldest, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't say it was the oldest. The Grey Cup, and that's a tough one to win, too. But the toughest championship to win of any professional sport is the Stanley Cup.
Canadians don't know a lot of this stuff. The Grey Cup, which is, again, for all of you who are listening from outside of Canada, the Grey Cup is the trophy that goes to the champion of the Canadian Football League,
which is the best.
Which is
league.
kind of like American football. It's just
a better version.
It's American football with a few minor modifications. But
No. Because Canadian football came first, American football is Canadian football watered down.
Okay, now you see. Now you're just begging for me to respond.
Go right ahead.
The original Stanley or the original Grey Cup actually wasn't for football. It was for, wait for it, yes, you guessed it, rugby. And I'm talking rugby union, not that sissy rugby league stuff. Okay? Rugby came first, of course, and rugby is much older than American or Canadian football.
But the oldest football trophy in the world is the Grey Cup.
Okay, I'm willing to concede that.
Right. And because the Americans figured the game out long after we did and watered it down by going to a smaller field and an extra down.
Now hang on a second. The first football game, okay, whether we're talking here Canadian or American style. Oh, by the way, guys, this is nowhere near on our list of things to talk about, okay, in case you're wondering.
We're just having some fun.
You're looking, people are scrolling up to the top of the page and going, really? I don't see this anywhere. Okay, no. But seriously, as a bit of trivia, it was in 1880-something, I think, and it was a game between McGill University, and I want to say Notre Dame, but I'm not 100% sure. But it was actually a college game between a Canadian. It was McGill University and an American college.
And who won it?
I don't know beyond that, but that was sort of the first where they had these modified rules and stuff like that. So the truth is, the origin of American football or Canadian football is jointly American-Canadian, interestingly enough.
Well, the better version. I won't argue the talent. There's no point arguing the talent because money. If I could play for $2.5 million a season or $50,000 a season, where would I play? Nobody's going to argue that. But
if you're the typical Canadian, you'd probably, if you're a typical Canadian, you'd probably stay in Canada and take the lower pay.
Well, that's
because especially since Trudeau Senior was the prime minister and he changed. It took a while, but we really changed the culture here where nobody cares to make a profit anymore.
Yeah, well, there's that. But at the same time, the Canadian game is the better version of the two games. And that's because you have to move the football.
Okay.
There's none of this 2 yards of carry and keep the ball. I'm sorry, that doesn't work.
Well, you can't do 2 yards of carry in the United States.
I'm being facetious.
Okay, so let's do something a little more interesting because I'm not sure that our audience wants to just listen to. This is not just a sports show, okay? All right.
Well, it's a Stanley Cup final. Come on.
Okay, but it's over
anyway,
now.
you're
Done.
Right.
Ancient history. Let's talk about. We were talking during the break about conservative books and conservative movies.
Right.
So what are some of the movies and shows? We just finished. My wife and I just finished binge watching the series Blue Bloods. Blue Bloods, which it's a police show, 22, 23 episodes a season. We just watched 8 seasons. There's a 9th that has just finished, and my understanding is that they've been renewed for a 10th season. And this is starring Tom Selleck, and it's set in New York. And
he's still alive?
Yes, he is. And Tom Selleck is the police commissioner in New York City, and he has kids who are, obviously they're adults, and they are also in the police and that. And, we watched this, and what we thought, it's a typical American cop drama, okay? Solve the mystery in 40 minutes or less. It's not, there isn't a lot of plot, there isn't a lot of character development. It's very formula. But what really was interesting about this particular series that caught us unaware and that we appreciated, Nick, was the traditional values. Every week there's a period where the family is getting together, the Reagan family. The commissioner, Tom Selleck, is his name is Frank Reagan. Right. And his father, who's the grandfather, is retired former police commissioner as well. And then he's got a couple of sons who are cops. So they gather around for family dinner. They go to church. Okay. They're praying and saying grace on television. They're talking about traditional values. And they're really quite defensive. They really are quite promotional in terms of the police. It's a real pro-cop show. And every now and then a little bit of leftyism creeps in. But then they shut it right down, It's a really interesting show. It's entertaining. As I said, if you're going to binge watch this, you're going to get tired of it because it's like a typical American cop show. There's this formula. But it's nice to see a successful television show that espouses traditional family values. It's not afraid of them, where people are not afraid to, cross themselves. They're Catholic family. It's really nice. So that would be one thing, that one television series.
There's
don't watch
another
a lot
one
of
then,
TV,
if that's the road you want to go down, that was canceled. Oh, I can see his face. It was about a guy who ran an outdoor store.
Right. Well, now, hang on. I know the one you're talking about. Last Man Standing.
Yes, but what's the guy's name?
Tim Allen.
Thank you, Tim Allen.
Now, yes, it was canceled, but they've brought it back now. Another network has picked it up. So I don't know where they are right now.
Well, the thing about it is, it was canceled, and the fan outcry, because the show was so popular, was so great that somebody picked it up and ran with it. I don't know if the same network picked it up or not.
No, it was a different one.
But they came back with it.
Yes.
Because one of the things that Hollywood loves to do is bash traditional values. But one of the things Hollywood likes to do, the other thing they like to do is make money. And they know that by making movies and series that espouse traditional values, they make a lot of money. And if you want to run one of my favorite movies from a family-friendly, conservative point of view is Saving Nemo, or Finding Nemo, Saving the Clownfish.
Right.
Anyway, and that's got Ellen.
You're thinking Saving Private Ryan.
Yes.
You're trying to get.
I'm trying to blend it, and it's not working.
Finding Nemo. I think
Finding Nemo. Anyway, and that features a bunch of different voice actors you'd recognize. But the point is that movie demonstrates the traditional value of a father sacrificing everything, not just for his son, but for his family, right? He does everything that little clownfish can do to get his son back. Now, it wouldn't matter whether it was son or daughter, but in this case, it just happened to be his son. And it's a fantastic movie that makes fatherhood look noble. And there are precious few of those. So that was one, I think, if you're looking for a good conservative movie with a real good moral to it, that's the one to watch. Now, another one that I really like that falls in the same category as good moral values is a series that we're watching, and I've been talking your ear off about it, but I'll tell other people about it, is this series called The Last Ship. Now, I'm not going to tell you anything about what happens, but the backdrop to the movie is there is a pandemic that is wiping out the population of the world. And there is a U.S. guided missile destroyer who's been sent into the high Arctic just off of Russia somewhere to go through what you and I would call workups, but it lasts 6 months. And they're up there firing their weapons and doing all their training and so on, so they can be combat certified. And they have a doctor who's looking for what they call the primordial strain. That's the backdrop. She's trying to find this primordial strain to come up with a cure for this, what they call the red flu. Anyway, the point is that it's a fantastic movie because, first of all, from a technical point of view, if you like this kind of thing, then you're going to enjoy the kind of attention to detail they pay to the military and the way they operate. If people with good solid morals matters to you, then there's a real strong element of faith. Now, they don't pick out one faith over another. It's just basic, like they're not saying we're Baptist, we're Protestant, we're Catholic, we're Jewish. But all of those faiths are represented, and there's this undercurrent of their faith being what carries them through these trials, and they go through one trial after another. The strength of the leading characters and how, you know, they're what drives them is the principles they live by. So it's a great series from that perspective. And I won't say I can't get enough of it, but it is something that my wife and I are watching for the second time, and I'm enjoying it as much the second time as I did the first.
So, you know, I could do some of the older movies. Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Yep.
My wife's favorite movie, Sound of Music. Very interesting, really, really nice movie. One of my favorite movies, Nick, more contemporary. It's a few years old now, of course. Rudy.
Oh, great movie.
Rudy is such a good movie. You know, if you're out there listening and you have kids, you know, we all face challenges in life and that, you have to sit them down and watch the movie Rudy. It is a fantastic movie, great life lessons in it, and to boot, it's a true story. It's based on a true story. Great.
The main character is played by, the guy that played Frodo's buddy in Lord of the Rings, Sam.
I know who you're talking about, but I don't know his name.
I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Come on, what's his name?
Come on, Nick, you're on your computer. Look it up.
I will. I'm just trying to get this posted.
Anyway, it's a great story, and it's all about perseverance. And I'm not going to give it away. And it's a football story. It's a football story as well.
Sean Astin.
Okay, so and there are a couple of great football stories. There's Brian's Song is a great football story. The story of Rocky Blyer. Rocky Blyer, I don't know if that was the name of the movie, but Rocky Blyer was a running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Rocky Blyer gets drafted into the Army during the Vietnam War. Okay, so he puts his football career on hold, his professional football career on hold, goes to Vietnam, and is severely wounded. And comes back, and he goes through a year or 2 years of rehabilitation, etc., and ends up returning to play professional football for the Pittsburgh Steelers right when they're on the cusp of their 1970s dynasty. Again,
with Terry Bradshaw and so on.
With Terry Bradshaw and
that whole
Mean Joe Green and
man, I'll never forget
all those guys.
Mean Joe Green had a great great Coke commercial.
Yes,
He's walking down the tunnel,
right,
and little boy, 6, 7 years old, walks up to him and hands him a Coke, and he tilts it back and drinks the whole thing and hands it back to the boy and smiles and walks on down the tunnel.
Yeah, no, he does. Now you see, I'm an aficionado when it comes to this stuff.
Okay.
So you've got it almost right. He drinks the Coke.
Yeah.
Okay. He thanks the boy, drinks the Coke, and starts walking away. And he's halfway down the tunnel, and you see the boy, he was trying to be nice to him, and he turns and he's down, he's frowning. Okay, I just gave this superstar my Coke, and he's not even acknowledging it. So the boy turns around, puts his head down, and he starts walking away, and you can see he's sad. And Joe Green is walking the other way, and then all of a sudden Joe Green turns and says to him, "Hey, kid." And the kid turns around, and he throws him his sweater.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
It's been a long time since I've seen it.
No, and while we're on this subject, Nick, in terms of great things, okay, the NFL does a really great series. I think you can get some of these shows on. Are
you talking about their old highlight reels?
No, well, sort of. Let me explain this, okay? So I think you can get these on Amazon Video, and it's called A Football Life, and they're about an hour long, and they focus on a story about one person or a team or whatever, and they're such great stories because they're all about character and redemption and perseverance and stuff like that. And they're just short, like, biographies on individual players, and the life of the player, okay? Where they grew up, how they got into the game and stuff like that. And they do highlights and they do interviews and things like that. I really recommend this stuff. Again, it's not, this is the kind of thing where when we were growing up in our generation, people would say, oh, that's corny. I think the corny was the word.
Right.
Okay. But corny is great stuff too.
Well, something.
It doesn't all have to be bad stuff.
Well, a lot of people, because I like Celtic music, I like country music, and one of my favorite artists in country music is a guy called Don Williams, who's since passed away, but what a great voice the guy had. And he was all about telling stories. And to me, that's what music's all about. If you want to hear music with good values, listen to Don Williams and his version. He does a song called Old Coyote Town. And it talks about the relationship between him and his dad and, what La Town was like when he left and just the whole experience. And the point is, my kids would say, oh, that is so corny. And I said, yeah, so? It has great life lessons in it. He does another one called What Do You Do with Good Old Boys Like Me? Or Cafe Carolina. Talk about a waitress who's been there 10 years too long and still isn't married, but she wants to be. All these wonderful stories. And I think getting back to this whole conservative idea, one of the things that needs to be done is for people to tell stories about real, honest-to-goodness, everyday, average conservatives. I once said to the pro-life group out of Renfrew, what you need to do is have 30 seconds, minute-long commercials of a family sitting down at a table, having a meal, and just talking among themselves about what their day was like.
Well, if you like that, Nick, you will love Blue Bloods, because that is a significant part of every single episode, without fail. Every episode.
Because that's, that is the kind of thing. You realize how many people don't have that? How many people are so busy with life, they never have a chance to sit down and get to know their kids around the supper table. Now, we're finding it harder to do now because our kids are getting older and moving on. But even when we come into town here, into Ottawa from up the valley, we try to make the effort to get together with the kids that are here in the city once a week, maybe a couple times a month, just to stay connected to each other, right? And we're going to have a celebration on the farm. We moved in July 16th, 1999. So we're going to celebrate 20 years this year on the farm. And we're going to have a big family shindig. Corn boil, we'll grab the guitars and howl at the moon till nobody can talk, that kind of stuff. So I really think that these kind of things are what will really help sell a conservative message in the proper light.
All right. Nick, this was a great segment. And listen, guys, don't be afraid to send in your comments. Even after the show's done and offline, you can still make comments. And we'd be interested in hearing what your thoughts are about great character-building television shows or movies, or any other, media like that. If you have some favorite songs, some tunes that you think have great life lessons, I think that'd be great. Post them on the comment section on this particular episode. Nick, it's been great. We had a really busy show, but unfortunately, as we come to the end every week, we have to wrap up. Thank you all for listening. Any final words there, Nick? Go Habs, go!
Go.
I saw Go Habs go in the comment section.
Did you? Yeah, well, no, it's Go Leafs go and wait till next year.
Yeah, the perennial Leafs response.
Hope burns eternal, buddy.
Okay, we'll see you next week here in the Combat Zone.